Welcome to Outlook Talks. Today we have with us political scientist and fellow of Center for Policy Research, Rahul Verma, and we always have with us our editor Chinky Sinha. So we will talk about the current elections and the campaigning and how it has changed, or it has just in the few months we have seen the changes in speech, we have seen the changes in campaigns, how it has operated in the elections. So thank you, Rahul, for joining
Thank you,
us.
Abhi, for having me. Thank you, Chinky.
Thank you.
So, Rahul, let's start with this, that in the last few months, we have seen during campaigns one of the major contentious point has been democracy. The idea of democracy, how democracy is going to operate. So opposition parties have been saying that it is, if the BJP comes to power, it will be the end of democracy in India. So how do you read these campaigns and how do you read democracy altogether?
So that's a very interesting question. I think what seems to be happening, it's a basically reversal of what Bhartiya Janta Party used to do during Indira years, right? Like if Indira comes back to power, then you will see a similar sort of like emergency provisions and hacking of democracy and other things. And now the current opposition, which is Congress, and many of other opposition parties have been making some of these points.
So this is just a sort of repetition of that thing that you...
In some ways, coming back of some of those points.
So in this case, if we consider that, as you were referring to BJS, and like at that point of time, how against Indira Gandhi, the opposition got consolidated. Even this time we have found the same. The opposition's parties came together and got consolidated. But is it working on the ground? The results in few hours, we are going to know what are the results. But what are you thinking about it?
It doesn't seem to be working because exit polls have indicated that BJP is coming back to power. Perhaps with a much more improved numbers than they had in 2019. And think of it, it also didn't work for BJS for a very, very long time. Congress was in power from 1952 to 1989, right? So except the 1977 election, this point was also made in 1971 election, right? So it's not that opposition coming together is automatically going to lead to defeat of the incumbent.
So, but as you were saying that democracy, and this is just a sort of a repetition of whatever has happened. Democratically, don't you think that the weakened opposition that we have been observing since 2014, a sort of weakened opposition, is actually affecting the health of democracy? How to get out of it?
Like you have to,
What is
I think...
what is the way out of it?
Think about this. Like, let's take a long view of Indian politics since 1952.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
In any dominant party system, opposition is going to be weaker. That's a feature of the dominant party system. There were some reasons that it took a serious opposition to challenge Congress and being able to replace them. Right? Since 2014, what we are witnessing is rise of the second dominant party system, this time BJP being the nucleus of that system. And the systemic feature is going to constrain, in some ways, opposition parties' ability to challenge them. To be able to defeat a dominant party, you need an extraordinary mobilization. Ordinary politics, everyday issues are not enough to displace a dominant party.
So what are the major issues that can be like mobilized? Because as you're saying,
I'll have to
issues,
join politics for that and win election, right?
Like, but otherwise, ordinary issues, the narratives that we found in the ground, that's not going to work.
No, jokes apart. See, like what I'm saying, some of these issues, right, like economic anxieties and other things, in a poor country like India, where a large population is dependent on the state for their well-being, these anxieties are always going to be there. So just based on those anxieties, you cannot build a politics, and you cannot build a politics in a very short period of time, right? So to be able to challenge a dominant party system, which to my mind has certain characteristics. First, there is going to be an ideological hegemony of that party, right? This is not to say everyone buys that ideological idea, but a larger portion or larger proportion of masses would in some ways or will agree to that ideological. And that's why you will see some of the opposition parties will also mirror that in tactics. Second thing, what you are going to see, that a dominant party system is presided by a charismatic leader at the top. This is not to say that leader has to be respected and loved by everyone, right? But the person is going to be charismatic. Third, what you are going to see is that it has an unparalleled organizational machinery, right? Fourth, what you are going to see is that they will have very large or undue advantage over all kinds of resources, including money and communication. And fifth, because of these things, opposition is going to be disarrayed. Even the efforts to come together would be hard. And even if you come together, it's not enough to dislodge the dominant party system. There was a reason why Congress party continued for so long in power, because it was a dominant party system. And there is a reason why BJP may continue for a much more foreseeable future.
I had a couple of questions, about this ideology situation and your research also focuses on that. So I just wanted to ask the role of ideology in terms of elections. The regional parties have their own ideological, whatever, agendas. And over time, we have also seen a lot of dilution with coalition politics and politics of opportunism, like people kind of dilute. Like, for example, if we look at Bihar, for instance, they went with CPI-ML. And kind of it had not happened for a long time, but they also gave up their land reforms thing and, so how does that work, and does it still work, and how does this dominant party ideology, how does that take over every other, like social justice, for example, DMK, there are all kinds of ideological, and it started with that, and then it kind of went more localized.
Okay. So, I think when we think of ideological politics, our first sort of like reaction in sort of comparative sense is, okay, if you look at United States, there is a clear sort of like divide between Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
A similar kind of ideological structures don't exist in India.
Yeah.
Or a similar level of clear divide don't exist in India. And that is true. What Pradeep and I try to do in our book, the argument we make is like fairly simple, is that in India, there is an ideological divide. And that divide has been there for a very long period of time. The rise of BJP is a culmination of a historical battle that has been waged on Indian soil for over a century. So it's not a sudden rise. Now, what does ideology consist in Indian case? So ideology, in some ways, what we are trying to say is a bundle of ideas, right, or issues. Issues and ideas are going to change from election to election, but ideology in some ways is basically, you're not going to care about everything, but because that becomes part of the ideological bundle, you basically put yourself on one side. And so for us, the politics in India, like at the national level, and this needs to be probed more, has been on two axes. The first axis we call as politics of recognition, which is basically how to bring different groups or marginalized groups of citizens into the mainstream of politics, right? And whether we are going to use measures such as reservations or quotas, or there was an agreement that there is a marginalized community, right?
Yes.
And we need to do something about them. The difference is on methods, right? And similarly on what we call as statism, which is how much state is going to intervene in sort of like family affairs, redistribution of property and other things. And these ideological divisions were very visible if you read through the freedom movement documents and if you read through the Constituent Assembly debates. Right? What we did additionally after reading those documents, we took survey data, which CSDS has conducted, long back under Professor Rajni Kothari in 67-71, and then the series after 1996. We show that voters of different parties actually have some ideological leaning. And this is consistent. BJP or BJS voters will stand on what you will call as the right. The Congress voters are likely in the center. And the left and socialist parties were on the left. And this pattern is consistent. What is also consistent is that a large mass, which is across the globe, is in the middle, right? You have like 10 to 15 to 20% population on this extreme and 10 to 15% of population on that extreme. Then it be and then there is a large mass which is in the middle. And this is what happens everywhere. Now, because in India there are so many parties, and the issues and the demographic compositions and everything at the state level differs, someone should take that study forward, critique us, criticize us, whatever they want to do, but at least see how much of these ideological components, because our argument was at the national and historical level, how much does this work in Northeast? Are their axes different? How much does this work in southern states or northern states, right? And so that needs to be done. But ideological axis, in some ways, what it does is structures the party competition. Right? And so what we did in the second part of the book, we first showed that there is an ideological competition. In the second part of this book, we show that movement of political parties, the changes in the party system from a Congress dominant system to a coalition system to a BJP dominant system is a result of political parties moving in that space. Now, how do parties move? They move because of the leaders. Leaders basically make those changes within the parties, right? And what we basically, and someone, again, there is a need for some political theorists to intervene, is when we think of ideology, we make it as if it's a pure thing. If you are ideological, then you should not be, making some sort of like adjustment, adaptation, or opportunism, right? I think we need to think about that even while being ideological, right? Parties and leaders have to show flexibility, because if you are too much ideological and don't show pragmatism, then you will become dogmatic and you will lose out, which is what seems to be happening to the left parties in India, right? And BJP has shown much more agility and flexibility, and that's why they are rising at this moment. This is not to say that BJP will always keep rising, and right, at some point they will, like during the
Saturate.
process of rise, not saturate, during the process of rise. See, politics at the end of the day is a game of balancing the contradictions. And at the end of the day, at some point, those contradictions would become large enough that once your sort of like most charismatic leader is not around, once there is like a better leader comes on the alternative side, once you're not able to manage those contradictions, then you will have a problem. Think about it. Congress declines begins at its peak. In 1984, they got highest majority that they had ever got.
446,
Within 3 years, the government by 1987 becomes a lame duck government, and 1989 is when their national decline begins. And why it begins? Because till Mrs. Gandhi, Indira Gandhi was at the helm of affairs, because of her charisma, she was able to hold on to the contradictions. And those contradictions had started becoming visible in 1980, right? Political scientists had pointed out why 1980 is not a restoration. While you have won the election, it's not a restoration, right? And as soon as Indira Gandhi departed the scene, within 5 years, the Congress system starts showing signs of collapse.
But as you were saying, the 1984 elections, and you're referring to that huge margin, Congress almost got 414 seats. It was for sympathy. It was Indira's sympathy, because after Indira's scaling, the sympathy vote actually got consolidated. Don't you think it was just 77 when Congress actually got decimated almost, and thereafter it went on in 1989. It was the culmination. How do you read it?
In politics, no election is decided by a single factor.
Yeah.
And we continue to make this mistake every election because we want a simple explanation, one talking point. What's the punchline?
Yeah.
1980, Indira had won, right? Returned with a thumping majority.
Yeah.
Opposition has fragmented, right? By if you look at 1980 election, even if Indira Gandhi had not died, do you think any other opposition party was credible enough to replace Congress party at that time? They may not have got 404. But I don't think there was any other party that would have got, stopped Congress from getting 272. Right? And so, yes, Indira Gandhi's death might have given them some bump. They might have got just 350 seats. They got 4-5% extra votes and 50 more seats. Same might have happened in 2019. What you call like Balakot. It would have given a 25-30 seat bump. Yeah. But it wasn't as if like Pulwama Balakot would not have happened and BJP would have been below 200.
Exactly. And I had one other thing that you talked about contradictions, right? Like a charismatic leader holds on to different kinds of contradictions and then kind of channelizes it or however. What were the contradictions that Indira Gandhi was holding on to, and what is Mr. Narendra Modi holding? What are these contradictions? Because also looking at the 2024 campaign, for instance, after the two phases, the campaign also got really, really like high octane, emotional, kind of aggressive. There was a lot of othering, and the fact that they were not like scared of this, there was also this whole, arrogance in terms of like name calling, all kinds of. I mean, maybe there was an audience to it, but what is then the contradiction here?
Okay, so let me start with the second question first.
Yeah.
Which is that why did BJP suddenly change course?
Yes.
Right? To my mind, I think there was a bit of knee-jerk reaction from every corner, including analysts who should be more circumspect.
Yeah.
Because everyone thought that the turnout drop is very severe. By the end of the election, we know that overall turnout drop is very minuscule, right? And second point is basically, so first knee-jerk reaction from every side, including BJP, Prime Minister Modi.
Yeah.
The reason why that knee-jerk reaction from BJP would have come, and this is just a speculation, is that two things. One, Prime Minister has never campaigned in a less charged election.
Exactly.
He needs a very, very charged up election. That's where he plays. Think of 2002,
Yeah.
2007, 2012, 2014, 2019. When he leads the campaign, it can't be a normal sort of like, हाँ वोट करने जा रहे हैं. There has to be energy.
There has to be some
right? And so to perhaps like their reading might be, I need to put energy into the campaign. How do you do that? You charge up your base. How do you charge up your base? You go to the core ideological messaging, right? The second, I think, is perhaps a reaction to Congress or opposition parties' campaign. And this is again a speculation, I think Prime Minister thought that many of the promises that Congress is making, or at least the way they have turned around Ab Ki Baar 400 campaign narrative, that they need 400 पार क्योंकि इन्हें संविधान बदलना है, डेमोक्रेसी बदलनी है, और हम कास्ट सेंसस करेंगे, सबको उनके बराबर. They thought that this might get traction, and so what Prime Minister did is basically picked up Congress manifesto, went back to BJP's core ideological messaging on Hindu-Muslim, brought in redistribution, married all three together, and used very powerful symbolism. कि ये आपका मंगलसूत्र लेने जा रहे हैं.
Yeah.
Right? So he basically combined multiple things into one to basically sort of like put a cap on Congress or opposition parties' messages taking any deeper roots.
And what about the first one, the contradictions that they're holding on to, and also the opposition? I mean, were they not able to hold on to these kinds of contradictions because their messaging was not very clear? Like, I had no idea what I was going to vote for. And, like, for example, I know at least with the BJP that, okay, this is what it is. With this mixed messaging over here, it was very kind of, so contradictions in both.
Let's think about the contradictions. What are the contradictions? The first contradiction is, what is your social base, and who are you basically projecting as leaders or giving tickets and nominations and making ministers and chief ministers? Congress was a rainbow coalition, right? Upper caste, scheduled caste, Muslims were the large blocks that used to vote for them. What was Congress leadership for first 30 years? Mostly upper caste, right?
Yes.
So at some point, you started seeing rise of caste-based parties across North India saying, we need more representation, right? And so those castes started gravitating towards them. Similarly, what was happening is that Congress party, in a dominant system, this is what has happened. You will basically absorb everyone or poach everyone, right? So some people are part of your own core ideological group, but some who are not ideologically sort of aligned to you, but they think you are the vehicle through which power can be won, you will get them, right? That's the second contradiction. At some point, there is going to be a fight within the core ideological group and the non-ideological group over power, right? The third kind of contradiction is going to be like when someone is at helm of affairs, right? then there is going to be a greater centralization within the party
Exactly.
structures. Power is going to be centralized around 2-3 people, right? And once that happens, then what it does, it basically stops all kind of incentive structures for other people to rise, because then there is going to be who's more loyal to me, and those kind
Yeah.
of. So all these contradictions start sort of like building up.
Yeah.
I will like to put it this as Chinky was saying, ideology and ideological politics, ideological hegemony, as you were talking about. In 2013, when during Aam Aadmi Party's emergence, we certainly saw a shift, a sort of from ideological politics to specifically infrastructural politics, where welfare schemes were focused, and the broader political ideology, as we understand, if we take Althusser's definition as well. In that way, Aam Aadmi Party, as we have read it, it's not in that way they operated. They spoke about water, they spoke about electricity, the infrastructure, people's lives. But gradually, if we look at now the exit polls and the elections results, even that failed. So, how do you
Because, see, in political science and those who study ideological politics, we basically talk about two kinds of issues. One, what is known as valence issues, and the other one is known as positional issues.
Yeah.
Valence issues are those on which every party is going to have a similar position, right? And it basically, voters are going to decide on the credibility of performance. So, delivery of welfare, reduction of corruption, right? Like improving people's life, right? Or improving infrastructure. All these are valence issues, right? No one is going to say, I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to do the opposite thing,
Yeah.
right? So then it basically becomes how your performance is in comparison to alternative, and you are going to be voted on that. Then you have positional issues on which parties are going to take opposite positions,
Yeah.
right? Whether we need construction of Ram temple or no, situation as it is, right? Sometimes valence issues also become positional issues. To give you an example, national security is a valence issue, right? Every party would say we should protect the borders and do everything in our capacity to protect it. It becomes a positional issue. How do we want to do it? Do we want to bomb Pakistan, put our army on the border, or we should protect our national security interests through dialogues and tier 2 things, right? So, with both these things exist. If you are going to be a single issue party or a single caste party, you will face challenges. There are going to be times when you will win elections because of the prevailing circumstances. But the problem is, at some point of time, on that issue, if there is another party that can match you, then you'll be in trouble. And so this election, if exit polls are going to be right, then you are seeing extinction, or at least like you've seen decline of BSP in front of our eyes.
Completely.
You are seeing decline maybe of like BRS has exploded in this election. Assam Gan Parishad, single issue, right? So unless you are mobilizing on multiple issues and you are forming multiple coalitions, politics at the end of the day game is of constructing majority through coalitions. Coalitions not in terms of just like bringing leaders, coalitions on the ground, so social and political coalitions. And different coalitions come to you because you are serving different interest.
Yeah.
As you said about coalition, so do you think that the very messaging to the people went wrong when Congress and Aam Aadmi Party fought against each other in Punjab, left and Congress fought against each other in Kerala, Trinamool Congress and left fought against each other in Bengal? The political messaging went wrong somewhere or other because there was some sort of
Partly
solidarity was.
that may be true, but I don't think it like even if they would have come together, what would have that changed? Right? It may have made the competition in some cases better or much more tougher. But think of a SP-BSP coalition in UP, right? So it's not like, see, the 1989 to 2014 formula of or language of understanding Indian politics has to change.
Okay.
Right? If you are still stuck in how politics happened in every system has a different sort of like formula of conducting politics. I'm not saying I know this formula, but just think of it, right? Like there are systemic changes that have happened, and so you need to recalibrate some of those things. Like the reason why at 30% or 25%, BSP and SP have formed single largest majorities
Yeah.
in UP in 25 and 27%.
Yeah.
Now SP in the 2022 UP election got its highest vote share ever, but got lower seats.
Yeah.
The reason because the polity has become bipolar,
Yeah.
right? And so now at 30% in UP, you will not be able to cross any threshold.
Yeah, and I had one other simple question that you talked about this voter behavior also. You studied that.
जी.
Now, अगर आप ये देखेंगे कि somehow this religion thing, and in so BJP when it started, Deen Dayal Upadhyay had said integral humanism was the ideological thing. Then 89 Hindutva and all of that. So how did they how does a voter kind of respond to this ideology? See, religion has become very prominent now as an ideological. I mean, what we see. I'm sure they are marrying it with many other things, but what comes to us and what is more visible is this huge thing, Hindu Rashtra, the visual optics of it, the temple is there, all of this is, there's a lot more effort going into South in terms of building this perception with Shiva, there's an appropriation over there, Adivasi situation, this Ghar Wapsi, indigenous person kaun hai India ka, all of these things are also there, and these are very, very prominent ideological positions that they have taken. So how does a voter kind of react to that, or how does that, and why has this happened? Like, why is this increased religiosity?
First, religion has always been important part of our political life, and caste also. The problem is that we want to think of politics as if only economic issues should be the determining criteria. How you are feeling economically should be deciding how you should vote. So this logic doesn't work anywhere, not in India, not in Europe, and not even in United States, the middle class fascination destination, right? So social fault lines are always going to be reflected in politics. Why? Because through politics you are trying to acquire power, right? So social fault lines will always get reflected in politics. Religion was always a part of our politics. Even during the 1950s and 60s and 70s, religion was used in a very different way. Not just by in some ways, why was Congress an umbrella coalition? Congress was an umbrella coalition because it had tendencies of left and socialist bloc, but it also had the entire right-wing bloc within it, right? What happens in the sort of 1950 to 1980 is slowly those right-wing blocs from moving from Congress party towards Jansangh. Why does BJP grow slowly, right? And just to give you a trivia fact, we all know about Gulzari Lal Nunda, two-time interim Prime Minister of India. He was also the founding member of VHP. When Vishwa Hindu Parishad was formed, he was sitting on the dais, right? The entire Patel group, what you'll call as syndicate or conservative congressmen, were actually your chief ministers in different states of India, right? The politics of religious conversion, in some ways, the laws and other things were passed right. So it has always remained part and parcel of our politics. I think what the rise of BJP in some ways is that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they managed to convince a sizable section of middle classes and upper caste that Congress politics is of appeasement to Muslims, and in some ways what this is going to lead to that Hindus in their homeland and motherland are going to be reduced to second-class citizen. And so slowly, it has larger takers, and at the end of the day, they manage to convince a sizable section of population that this is happening. Whether it's true or not, I'm not getting into that, right? Because each parties exaggerate what to their constituents, what they want to happen in politics.
Thanks a lot, Rahul. We could have, the discussion could have been longer, but we are running out of time. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Abhi.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much,
Chinky.
Rahul.
Thank you for watching.